Mr. Kwan, thank you very much for your comments. I'm extremely happy to be with you this afternoon. And I had been wanting to come for quite a long time. And so I did not hesitate to accept the invitation, and I'm happy to see in the room some of the people who also worked with me in the past, like Abrahimi, Alvaro de Soto, some of the people we knew in New York, did the brief, and others. But the question which has been posed, and I'm pleased you use the word cyclical, because I know the campaign has started again in Washington to bash the UN, to withhold funds until certain things are done. I think the UN is a member state. The UN is 192 member states you referred to. And it's extremely difficult to explain the UN to the public. I often say that we have two UNs. The UN that is a secretariat headed by the Secretary General and the bureaucrats. And then you have the UN that is made up of member states who sit in the Security Council and the General Assembly and give us our orders, give us mandates, sometimes with adequate resources, sometimes without resources. And when you have difficult issues that has to be tackled, sometimes the member states say, take it to the UN. When you take it to the UN, you've done something. It is a let's do something syndrome. So you dump it on the Secretary General and the Secretariat, knowing fully well that they are handicapped, that there's really no real solution for them, but at least you've done your work. When it goes well, you take the credit. When it doesn't work, it's those stupid bureaucrats at the UN. But having said that, let me say that the UN does have its purposes. It's not just a paper tiger. And I think since I'm in an academic environment, I can allow myself the luxury of debating this point with you. We are accused of talk shop, paper tiger. You have lots of discussions and what comes out of it. I think the UN has made some major contributions in areas of development, of health, on legal issues. And in fact, when you look at the system around the world, our lives would be extremely complicated if the UN and its agencies did not work with us in making the world habitable. Take even ITU, we all take our communication and other things for granted. But it is that UN agency that determines the frequencies. It is the international system that also indicates we all should use English when we fly so that the pilots can talk to each other. So there are a whole host of practical things the UN does for us. But we tend to focus on the conflicts where there's blood and we wonder what the UN has done or not done. Let me say that when you look at norm setting, the UN has been very effective and very good. And sometimes you're even surprised that the member states would accept certain norms, like the responsibility to protect. We pushed it, but we were very pleasantly surprised that the member states accepted it. But I think the UN can be strong if the member states are determined to make it work and make it more effective. They need to reform the organization. They need to accept that the world is changing and the UN also has to adapt. Let me take one area. I don't think the member states can maintain the structure and the power structure of the UN as it now is with 5 permanent members. I tried to push for change of Security Council, we failed. But I cannot see how the Council can sustain its influence and reliability when it keeps countries like India out of the Council, when there's no permanent member from Latin America, none from Africa, given all that is happening. So my advice is, instead of blaming the UN as paper tiger, let's all work to make it more effective. If the countries with privilege want to see cooperation from the new countries, new emerging countries, they first have to ask themselves, what sort of power do we have to give up to make the participation of the new countries meaningful, to bring them into the table so that we can work out problems together? Because if we do not do that, we are going to come to a situation where some of these emerging countries will simply ignore decisions taken by bodies that they are not effectively represented. And then it can lead to destructive competition. I know I'm asking them to give up influence, and yet I have to admit there are two things in life that I believe, once extended, people find it difficult to give up. One is subsidies, and the other is privileges. We don't hear enough about that, because it's often the privileged who are talking about the subsidies of the poor, but they never talk about giving up their privileges, and I think we're getting to the stage where that side of the equation has to be looked at. Thank you.
Thank you, SG. You have 3 mics in the room, so please you queue on both sides, and it's a question and answer. Make your questions as short as possible so that the SG can answer as many of them as possible. So we have 1 up and 2 on the 2 sides of the with me.